2 weeks later at school, Mrs. Rosso gave us an assignment. As you know, she began, 6th graders are expected to complete a volunteer service project during the second semester of school. This news was met with the expected collective groan. No, 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 she said, waving 2 fingers like a windshield wiper. I don't want to hear complaints, because if you complain, it's not voluntary service. If we have to do it, I thought, there's nothing voluntary about it. Service should be delivered with a smile, Mrs. Rosso said, smiling. You don't want to be the person you're helping to feel sorry for you. On the contrary, you want the person to think you're enjoying the privilege of being allowed to help. That isn't service, I whispered to Stormy over my shoulder. That's acting. She laughed quietly behind me. One good thing about spending time with Miss Turnipson during her Tuesday afternoon interviews was that it was bolstering my courage around Stormy. Now, Mrs. Rosso explained, as part of this project, Deputy Rodney will visit our class tomorrow to talk about the various places you can volunteer. Give it some thought. Find a cause you believe in. You'll also be writing a report about your service project. Oh, the groans that followed. Mrs. Rosso just closed her eyes and grinned. She'd been teaching 6th grade long enough to know we didn't blame her. Truth is, we all liked Mrs. Rosso. Not only did she play kickball with our class during recess, she also gave out full-size Snickers to kids who went trick-or-treating to her house in Diamond. It was one of the reasons everyone liked Mrs. Rosso, that and the old clawfoot bathtub filled with pillows in the back of her classroom. We got to take turns reading in the tub during silent reading time. It was just a silly thing, but when it was your turn to read in the tub, you couldn't help but feel cool. Deputy Rodney was decidedly less cool. He sounded like a zombie as he ticked off the various places we could volunteer. You could pick up trash along a road or highway, he suggested in a monotone. You could read to senior citizens in a retirement home. You could deliver mail to patients at the hospital. You could clean gutters at the jail. You could volunteer as a pet groomer at the county animal shelter. This last idea prompted several shouts of, "Mine! I get to do that, and I said it first." Please remember, Mrs. Rosso said, holding up a hand, that you're responsible for getting yourself to and from your service project. I don't want you asking your parents for rides because then it's not fully your project. I could hear Stormy let out a sigh behind me. The county animal shelter was in Neosho, probably 20 miles from Stormy's trailer, way too far to get to on a bike. What are you going to do for your project? I asked Stormy later that afternoon as we were waiting for the bus. I'd learned from watching Myron that the easiest way to start a conversation with a girl you liked was by asking a question. Service project, Stormy replied. I don't know. What I'd really like to do is help my mom find a job. Maybe look through the phone book and find businesses and addresses and then type some letters for her. I don't know if that'd count. I'm not sure we can do service stuff for our own family. I bet Mrs. Rosso would let you, I said. What kind of work does your mom do? She used to cook in a hospital cafeteria, added Stormy, but she kept missing work because of our car. It doesn't always run, so she lost her job. But she can't fix the car until she gets money from another job, and she can't get another job until she fixes the car. What about your dad? I asked. He's not really around, Stormy said. A million thoughts flew through my head. Should I tell her about my mom leaving? Should I tell her about my dad's lack of employment? Did she already know about Dad from reading my career day essay? Were her parents divorced? Did her dad visit or call her? Before I could decide which questions to ask, the bus arrived. As usual, Stormy sat in the front row and I sat near the back. She threw up once on the bus and had sat in the front ever since. It helped her stomach, she said, if she could see the road. A lot of kids got sick on Highway V. They're the ones who said it was named Highway V because it made you vomit. But the hilly road never bothered me. I liked the country roller coaster ride between home and school. The next day I heard Stormy talking to Mrs. Rosso about her service project idea. Perfect, Mrs. Rosso declared. That's exactly what you should do, Stormy. I'll show you how to make a resume for your mom. This'll be fun. Stormy smiled at me as she walked back to her desk. I told you she'd let you, I whispered. I wasn't sure, she whispered back. There's a restaurant in Dennis Acres that might need a cook, I whispered, hungry to keep the conversation alive. It's called Carmen's Casita. I've been there, Stormy said softly. She was writing it down. That's a good idea, thanks. You're welcome, I said, anytime. I still didn't have an idea for my project. After the last bell rang, I stayed behind in Mrs. Rosso's room. She was arranging the pillows in the bathtub. Mrs. Rosso, I said, can I do a service project in my house like Stormy's doing? Tell me your idea, she said. Well, I began. I immediately regretted launching this conversation. How could I possibly explain the situation at home? Yes, Mrs. Rosso said. She was flipping the pillows over and fluffing them up with the palms of her hands. I took a deep breath and started talking fast. See, my mom's been on a trip to Louisiana, and my dad and I are both kind of messy, I guess you could say. Why was I telling Mrs. Rosso this, or did she already know? Did everybody know? What are you thinking, Benny? Mrs. Rosso said gently. Just that maybe I could try to clean up around the house. I mean, the kitchen is a disaster. It's like a real wreck. I pretended to laugh. The living room, too. But I could clean up some of the other rooms. Maybe start in my room and go from there. If I could figure out how to work the washer and dryer, I could wash some clothes for my dad and me. I think we have a box of Tide somewhere. Mrs. Rosso stopped fluffing pillows. She was staring at me. Her face looked dead serious. Benny, she said, don't you dare tell anybody I said this, but that's the best idea I've heard all day. Really? Really. Do it and then write about it. You're a strong writer, Benny. I can see you writing books when you get older. That's a career you should consider. Oh, and here, let me write down a really easy way to do laundry. When I got off the bus that afternoon, I didn't linger at the radio station like I usually did. I stayed just long enough to pick up our mail and say hi to Myron. He was crouched under the console with a jumble of phone lines. I'm trying to rig up a system where people can call into the station, he said when I asked what he was doing. I want to have audience participation on our interview shows. Do a whole show where people call in and tell snake stories, I suggested. Everyone has a good snake story. Did you know the Ants brothers got chased by a hoop snake last summer? The snake got mad and rolled itself into a hoop by putting its tail in its mouth. Then it chased them around their yard for hours. Rural legend, Myron said from under the table. There's no such thing as a hoop snake, even though boys like you have been telling stories about them for years. Really? I said. But the snake swallowing the doorknob story is true. Mr. Prell doesn't lie. He's the mayor. Myron mumbled. I wonder if your dad would help me run these phone lines. Doesn't have to be today. I'll ask him. I'm going home now. Thanks, said Myron. He poked his head out from under the table and rubbed his eyes. Did you know your dad was the smartest kid in our class? He was? Yeah, he didn't always get the best grades, but he was head and shoulders above the rest of us. Smartest kid in the whole school, in fact. I found that hard to believe. That's why it's such a shame, said Myron, crawling back under the console table. A crying shame. Dad was sitting in the living room. He was surrounded by a pile of greasy motorcycle parts he'd found at the scrapyard. He was eating popcorn. He'd recently found a movie theater-style popcorn maker, also at the scrapyard. The word cornucopia was written in dancing popcorn kernels across the front. Dad claimed the machine was brand new. We'd been making popcorn almost every night for dinner. I was sick of it after 2 nights, but the smell was better than pizza, and no stinky boxes either. The stack of empty pizza boxes in the kitchen had grown almost as tall as me. Hey, Dad, I said. Myron wants to know if you'll help him run some phone lines. Dad said. He was chewing a mouthful of popcorn and looking at an engine diagram in an old Encyclopedia Britannica. Myron needs help, I said, at the radio station. Doesn't have to be today. The radio station, eh? Said Dad, not looking up. He never listened to the radio. He preferred game shows on TV. Yeah, will you be able to help him run some phone lines? He wants to be able to take calls when he's on the radio. The radio, Dad repeated absently, scratching his beard with a screwdriver. What's his station called? Crazy 88? KZ88, I said. It's 88.1. Right, Dad said. Idiot.1. I couldn't listen to him anymore. I went to my room and closed the door. Then I started to clean. I grabbed a pile of clothes off the floor and walked the bundle to the laundry room. I dumped my jeans and dark shirts in the washing machine along with a cup of Tide, as Mrs. Rosso had instructed. My clothes were so stinky, though, I added another cup of detergent just to be sure. I turned the first knob to heavy load and the second knob to cold. I pulled the on knob out. The machine started filling up with water. That was easy. I poured another cup of Tide in my hand and carried it to my bathroom. I poured some of the detergent in my sink, some in the tub, and the rest in the toilet. I found a toilet brush in the cabinet under the sink and used it to scrub everything. I rinsed the sink and tub with hot water and flushed the toilet twice. I returned to my bedroom and gathered up another load of dirty clothes. I dumped that pile in front of the washing machine. I made 4 piles in all. Next, I went to the kitchen and found a box of garbage bags under the sink. The smell in the kitchen was lethal. I knew I couldn't tackle that room. So I went back to my room and started filling a garbage bag with old school papers, candy wrappers, Kleenex, and old Matchbox cars I hadn't played with since 3rd grade. My bedroom looked noticeably better after only 10 minutes. I ripped the already torn Star Wars poster off my wall and stuffed it in the bag. Ditto the empty bulletin board that my mom had insisted I'd like. I didn't, and I pulled the sheets off my bed and wadded them up in a pile along with the empty pillowcases and several towels. I'd wash those in hot water next. Now that I could see the floor, I decided to vacuum. I had no idea where the vacuum cleaner was. I looked in the hall pantry. It smelled like cat urine. We hadn't had a cat since I was in first grade. I tried Mom and Dad's room. The bed was piled high with computer equipment. Dad had been sleeping on the living room couch ever since Mom left. All of his clothes were on the bedroom floor. I opened the closet. Dad had filled it with empty, unwashed jars. The hideous smell of rotting mayonnaise and salad dressing made me gag. I looked in Mom and Dad's bathroom. Dozens of empty toilet paper rolls were piled in a corner. I pulled my t-shirt out so it formed a bowl and loaded it with the cardboard rolls, which I carried to my bedroom and dropped in the garbage bag. "Dad," I yelled from my room, "where's the vacuum cleaner?" "The what?" he yelled back. I walked to the living room. "The vacuum cleaner," I repeated. "What do you need that for?" "I'm cleaning up around here." "Why?" he asked. "Because this place is a dump," I said, "and I'm sick of it." "Sorry to hear that," he said casually. He was still looking at the encyclopedia. I crossed my arms. "Did you know everyone in Dennis Acres might win a computer?" This was my magic bullet. I hadn't told him about the contest. I'm not sure why. I guess I liked knowing something he didn't know. I felt important delivering the news. "I think we have a pretty good shot at winning," I added, even though I knew it wasn't true. "No, we don't," Dad answered without lifting his eyes. "How do you know?" I said. "Myron told me all about it. Dennis Acres, America's most charming small town." He laughed cynically. "There's a good one." I don't think I've ever been as mad at anyone as I was right then. Dad must have noticed. "Relax," he said. "I'm going to help Myron with his phones." "You are?" "Course," he said. "He's my best friend. I always help him. Poor Myron's had a rough ride." "What do you mean?" "For one thing, his girlfriend died on graduation night," Dad said. "Myron was driving. He walked away without a scratch. She was DOA. "What?" "Dead on arrival," Dad said. I swallowed hard. I never knew that. Lot of things you don't know. I guess. I started to walk out of the living room. "Where are you going?" Dad asked. "I told you I'm looking for the vacuum cleaner." "Why?" "Because I'm cleaning the dang house." "Why?" "Because I want to," I said, "and because I have to. For school, we have to do a service project, and this is mine." Dad looked at me hard. "You have to clean our house for school." I sighed. "Every sixth grader has to do a service project. It's a school tradition. Mrs. Rosso said for my project I could clean our house." "Rosso," Dad said. He was getting up. He was digging through one of his piles. "Yeah, Mrs. Rosso. She's my teacher." Dad found a telephone book. He was paging through it. Rosso, he said. "Does she live in Diamond?" "Yeah, I think so. Why?" "There's only one Rosso listed," he said. He found the phone number under a stack of books and dialed. "Hello," he said into the phone. "Calvin Summer here. I'm looking for a Mrs. Rosso who teaches sixth grade at Diamond School." "It is?" "Good, because I want to know what you think you're doing making my son clean our house for a school project." "Uh-huh. Are you planning to pay him for this work?" "I see. And are you familiar with child labor laws?" "Right. Uh-huh. That's very interesting because are you aware, Mrs. Rosso, that that's not what school is for? Your job is not to teach my son how to clean houses. Your job is to teach him history and math. And do you know what I've noticed, Mrs. Rosso? You're not doing a very good job." "Dad!" I gasped, horrified. "No, let me finish," Dad said, waving me away. "Your job is to teach my son to think, Mrs. Rosso, how to think. Think!" "Dad," I said again, shaking my head frantically. "Is that so, Mrs. Rosso?" Dad was saying. "The Mrs. in your name suggests there is a Mr. Rosso. Do you assign him asinine service projects like you do your students? Do you treat him like a child too?" "Dad!" I shouted. "I'm just asking," Dad said, trying to sound innocent. He had his back to me now. "I'm just wondering because I don't think I've ever had the pleasure of meeting you, Mrs. Rosso." He paused. "Conferences? Nope, never received anything in the mail about parent-teacher conferences. Nope, never." "Yes, you did," I hissed. "I brought the letter home. You just didn't see it. You lost it in all of this crap." Tears of outrage were forming in the corners of my eyes. "No," Dad said in a fake, sad voice. "I'm afraid my busy schedule doesn't allow me the luxury of driving to Diamond in the middle of the day to meet a woman who gets her jollies playing power games with kids." I ran to my bedroom and slammed the door, but even then, there, I could hear Dad's obnoxious voice. "And what I'm saying is that Benny is exempt from this requirement. I don't want him participating." "Benny! Benny!" "What?" I yelled from my room. "Do not take anything out of this house," Dad yelled back. "Nothing leaves this house. Do you understand me?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just closed my eyes and listened to Dad's rabid craziness. "Oh, really? He won't pass sixth grade if he doesn't do a service project. Don't be ridiculous. Oh, so anything around the house would be acceptable to you. Fine, he can help me build a motorcycle. Goodbye, Mrs. Rosso. Tell your husband he has my sympathy." "What? You're divorced?" "I'm not surprised." I was wrong. I could be madder at someone, and I was right then.